What's up everyone, my name's Michael Taylor from 64 Motorsport, and on this video I'm going to show you how to polish your exhaust system to take it from plain old boring like this to a brilliant mirror finish like this. Now it's not as hard as you think. I achieved this result with a bare minimum of tools in my own garage. There's no fancy equipment, and for an investment of less than $50 I was able to achieve that result on that entire system. If you want to find out how you too can get a finish on your stainless steel exhaust system, which is going to be the envy of all your mates and certainly something that you can be proud of, keep watching and I'll run through everything you need to do and everything you need to buy to get the job done. Now I've literally spent hundreds and hundreds of hours polishing various bits and pieces and components underneath my car, from suspension components, nuts and bolts, brackets, diff cover, all that sort of thing. What I want to do is pass on some of that experience that I've gained. Hopefully it will give you some tips and help you to avoid any mistakes and give you the encouragement to have a go at it yourself. This project I've started filming last weekend, and due to family circumstances and a few other different things, I've had to do this project a couple hours at a time after work and in between other commitments. I wasn't able to sort of get it all done and filmed in one sitting. I wasn't after a show car finish. So there are certainly some marks and imperfections in the system that I was prepared to tolerate, because it's not a system which is going to be, say, on the side of a hot rod or something like that, where it's going to be there to be seen 24 hours a day. I didn't want to just accept the way the exhaust system looked as it came out of the box. I just wanted to take it up a couple of notches, and when you look at the end result at the end of the video, I'm pretty sure that I've achieved it. Anyway, let's get on to it. I'll get this camera reset up and then we'll get cracking. So as you can see, I've started tidying up around the welds, smoothing them out and what have you. I've still got a couple to do. I don't know if the camera can pick that up really well. You can see it's I just can't get into there with the grinder, so I've got a couple options there just to sort of get in between sort of bits, but the rest of it I've smoothed out the welds, and when you compare it to that, it looks pretty good. A couple of the other areas which I'm really concerned about are like these sort of marks here. Those sort of marks that are on there at the moment, I think they're from when they've done the mandrel bends, so it must be the machine that sort of put those marks in it. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it getting all those out. I'm just gonna clean it up as best as I can. So let me just put the camera down and I'll show you the tools that you're gonna need to get this job done. So if you need to clean up any welds or anything like that, you're gonna need your grinder and either a grinding disc or a flapper disc, probably about 80 grit, maybe 120. And the other thing that I've used is my little pneumatic 2-inch sander, and I'm going to use the belt sander to try and get in between the pipes. The next thing you're going to need is sheets of sandpaper, wet and dry, some buffing pads and buffing cream. So I bought these in a pack, and these just plug into my power drill. The other thing you're going to need is some wax and grease remover, and I really like to clean everything down before I start. It'll make your starting process much easier. Let's get this set up outside and I'll show you how I'm going to address these final bits of the welds and then how that looks, and then we'll go from there. So these are some of the areas where there are the marks from the mandrel, and what I've done is I've run over those with the blue buffing pad. I didn't want to be too aggressive with it, but I just wanted to get off some of the furs and smooth it slightly. So, but around the welds in particular, I think it's come up really good. Around these welds here and here, so I'm really happy with that. I'll get an idea how they look afterwards. And yeah, I've used the blue buffing pad just to finish off in preparation for sanding. But when you're using your sander, try and keep it as flat as possible on the surface. And like with any sanding, work in a couple of different directions. So I like to use the rule of thumb that north-south and then east-west, and repeat that process 3 times. And that generally is going to get rid of any of the marks. Have a look at it once you've done that, and then pay attention to any areas which need a little bit of extra work. What's up everyone? Just finished lunch. Belly's full, so ready to keep going with the polishing on my Supersprint stainless steel exhaust for the E46 BMW. So already I've got a really nice shine on it, but what we've got to do now is get rid of those scratch marks that I've put into it using the disc sander. The next step from here is I'm going to start with the sandpaper, and I'll just get the camera reset up and I'll show you what the process is for getting started on that. What I need is my sandpaper and a bucket of water, and we'll get started. So I've grabbed a piece of 400 out of my bucket, and the way I'm going to start, so I'll just feed it through there, and just with light even pressure go over it. And then once I've done this side, I'll swing it over and do the other side. Just work in small sections at a time. The feel and the touch of the paper will give you an indication in terms of how effective you're being. As you start to smooth it out, the paper will slide across the surface much smoother, almost like on glass. And you'll start to get an indication that you're smoothing it out. So now that I've gone in that direction, I'm going to go up and down, or crossways. And the reason you alternate the direction is you'll take off more material much faster. So what you're doing is creating like a crosshatch. So you're creating scores this way, and then when you come back the other way, you're taking out those score marks that you just put in, and you remove the material a lot quicker. Give it a bit of a wipe down to get rid of some of that excess material that you've just taken off. Soak it in water and we'll repeat that process. Now I can tell by the feel and the sound that this front section here is still fairly rough, whereas this section here has smoothed out much quicker, so I need to pay a bit more attention to this area here. I'll give that a little bit of extra attention. I might even just give that small section there a bit of a rub down with 320 grit and see how that comes up. Now once again, around this bend where the surface of the metal has been raised a little bit by bending the metal, that's also going to require a little bit of extra attention, and I may not be able to get it to the finish that I like using the 400, so I'll have to step down to the 320 and then back up to the 400. But I'll have another couple of goes and I'll see how this looks and then make a decision how I progress from there. You probably can't hear this on the camera, but you can actually hear that it's running much smoother across the surface of the metal, and it's really smoothing out nicely here. Can you hear that? That sounds like sandpaper on metal, whereas up here it's more just gliding across. Don't know if you can see though, I'll just lift it up a bit and it might change the light. So that's it there after just the 400, and I've got another couple of steps to go. But before I do that, I'm going to give it a hit around this section here with the 320 and back to the 400 before I keep going. You want to try and keep it wet because that's the water which will carry away the metal material that you're removing and prevent really deep gouges. If you don't wet it, then it's more aggressive, so you'll end up with much deeper gouges in it, and then you'll have much more work in terms of tidying it up later on. Now I can tell by the feel and the sound that there's a section right here which is still really rough, and that's from that gouge marks from the mandrel. But it's a lot smoother than what it used to be, so I'm not going to put too much more effort into this. Now the amount of effort and time that you spend on these beginning stages, so be it whether you start at 400, 320 or whatever, the more attention to detail that you put into it at this stage, the much better results you're going to get on the other side, and the much better it's going to polish up. So depending on the degree of finish you want will depend how fussy you are in terms of removing any imperfections in the metal at this point, because once you get to the much finer grits, you're either going to have to spend a lot longer trying to rectify it, or it's just not going to get out deep gouges. So this is the point where you need to sort of look and make a decision what you're prepared to put up with and what you want to remove. Now I'm really happy with that, and I reckon the finish that I've got on this with the 400 is about right, and I'm ready to progress to the 600. So I'm going to keep working on this side and then flip it over and work on the other side, and then I'll come back to you when I start on the next step. So I've just finished with the 400 grit, and this is about the level of finish that you're looking for to get the finish that I'm after, which is a really good shine. Basically taken all the fine scratches out. I've, as I say, not worried too much about the deep gouges at this point. Around the edges I've gone to a 320 and then step back up to 400 just to sort of smooth those out a little bit more. But this is about the stage you want. Have a good look over it. Make sure at this point that you've got all the imperfections out that you want before you step to the next stage. Because if you don't, you're going to have to come back to either the 320 or 400 to fix it, and it's just going to add more work. So spend a little bit extra time at this point to ensure that you're satisfied before you step to the next step, which is 600 grit. And I'm going to follow the same process that I applied on the previous step. We grab our 600 grit and we start again. We'll go this way and then cut across the other way as well. Now you should start to notice after a couple of passes with the 600 that you're really starting to get a nice shine to it. It will start to show up any imperfections which you haven't addressed in the previous steps though. So this is a good point where you can take stock once you get to the 600 grit and then go back and address anything that you're not quite happy with. So if you've had to go back to a 240 grit, you then need to go and fix it up with 320, 400 before you get back to the 600, or else you end up with all those fine scratches in your final finish because they won't polish out. So I'll keep going with the 600 and then I'll come back to you and then let you know where we go from there. Rightio, so I've got all that finished up to 800 grit, and then the final step is you grab some wax and grease remover and give it a good wipe down, because that'll help to get rid of any of the residual gunk, bits of old sandpaper, sort of thing. Get any of those metal filings out of the grain in the metal, because what you want to do is have a good look at it and then make an assessment in terms of whether you're ready to go to the next step or not. And that's the amount of gunk you're going to get off it. It's a really important step, this one. By removing the old material that you've cut away, any of the dust and gunk and that sort of thing, it'll make the next step much easier, because you don't want any of that harder grit of sandpaper sitting on the surface, because what you'll do is you'll put score marks in and it just adds to your work. So taking an extra 5 or 10 minutes to give it a really good thorough wipe down before you go to the next step is going to save you a lot of work. So that's my free tip for the day. So I'll just keep wiping this down, and then I'll get the camera off the tripod and bring it down here so you can have a much closer look as to what it should look like after you've got to your 800 grit stage. So I'm really happy with that. So that's the level of finish that you're going to get after 800 grit. And that's pretty good. That's, yeah, there's a few scratches and gouge marks in there which I knew about. This section here is where it hooks up to the next one, so I didn't worry too much about that. But overall, that's come up really good. Now I'm down here at the tailpipe section, and I'm going to work on this first, because this is the one that gave me all the problems yesterday. I think I probably spent almost as much time on this small section, or these two small sections of pipe, than I'd spent on other two components. Even still, it's not as good as I'd have liked, but for the amount of time that I wanted to put into it, it's come up really good, and there's already a bit of a shine on it. What I've decided to do is use the black cutting compound first, and then go to the brown cut and polish, and then to the white polish. We'll see how this goes, and hopefully we get the results that I'm after with a little bit of elbow grease. Bear with me while I get my head out of the way and we focus on what I'm doing here. This is going to look killer once it's finished. So I'm really stoked with that. As you can see, I've got a fair bit more to do. What I'll do is I'll jump forward a bit, finish off these two, and then before I start with the red, I'll give you a look and we'll go from there. So you can see what it looks like at the different stages. So I've got all the parts polished using the black heavy duty cutting compound. The next step is that we go to the red cutting compound and then finish off with the white polishing paste. So I'll grab the camera down and give you a look what it looks like after the black heavy duty cutting compound. So as you can see, it's really come up with a shine, and this may be the level of finish which you're prepared to accept. It really is personal preference. Still a couple of finer sort of scratches in around here. Some of these other sections, like the front here, have come up super well. I mean, you'd take that any day of the week. Yeah, so some of those sections have come up really well, and for the most part you'd accept it. It's got the shine and the mirror finish that most people would be after. But I am going to go the extra couple of steps to give you guys an indication how it progresses with each stage. The amount of time that you spend with the buffing wheel will also dictate the final result. So I'm going to put this camera down. We'll go from there.
You can call me stupid. Yes, you can call me sheep. You can say I'm lazy. You can say I'm weak. You think that using her would get to me, and if you're right, then you're in trouble, D. 'Cause I won't break, no, I know I won't wait. You're in trouble, D.
Now, I'm super stoked about that end result. It's certainly come up exactly as I was after. As I said at the beginning, I wasn't after a show car finish. I just wanted a level of shine to complement the rest of the work that I'd done underneath the car. So yes, there are some scratches and some imperfections in the pipework, which I personally am prepared to tolerate given the rest of the project. Now sure, if this was exposed or if you're after a show car finish, you can add to those steps to get an even better quality of finish. The amount of work and effort you put into those early stages in particular in terms of correcting any faults or flaws or imperfections in the metal will pay you huge dividends at the end. So if you're going to spend some extra time, spend it at the beginning of the project to get all those sort of things tidied up, because the more you progress through it, the less work you'll require to get a good result. Post me a comment. What do you think of the end result? Do you think I've achieved what I set out to, or do you think I should have put a bit of extra work in? Let me know. I'm really happy to answer all your questions and to read all your comments. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to see more content for BMW owners about maintenance, performance upgrades, and to take a sneaky look at what I'm up to on my E46, then consider subscribing and ring that bell so you get notified each time a new video comes out, which is generally about once a week. So I've enjoyed your company. I hope you got something out of it. But until we meet again, look after yourselves, stay safe, and TTFN.